Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice break and you were able to stretch your legs a bit and that you're as excited as I am about this next part. That is a panel discussion titled, How Does Tripartite Cooperation Contribute to a More Gender Equal Working Life? Our moderator for the discussion is Gudrun Jevne, Program Manager and Senior Advisor at the Norwegian Agency for Children, Youth and Family Affairs. Ms. Jevne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I would like to start with a story, actually. You see, I spoke with my grandmother recently. She is 96, so she can teach me a lot about gender equality in the world of work over the years. She, in fact, studied to become a teacher in the 1940s during the Second World War. And after working for a few years, she had my father, and then she found herself in a bit of a conundrum. She needed a kindergarten to continue working, but there was none to be found. What to do? Well, she told me she went to the council, the municipality council. She argued her case for a kindergarten. She received funding and she set one up. And it was the first professional kindergarten in my hometown. I'm so proud of her activism. And I told her so. I told her, this is real gender equality activism, grandmother. I'm so impressed. But she just looked at me, mildly surprised actually, and said, no. She said, we were just solving a practical problem. We had an education and we wanted to work. So tough grandmothers can change things locally. But with all respect to her, more is needed too. Government workers, employers and workplaces need to cooperate to elevate gender equality to the national level. But how does this happen? How do we work systematically for gender equality, extending the pragmatism of grandmothers and individuals and the activism of groups to be of a national concern? This is what we'll discuss in this panel, and we're very lucky to have an expert panel representing workers, employers and the government who have insight into how this is done. And we're also very lucky to have on the panel a representative from a large workplace who can shed light on how to work systematically with equality in a male-dominated sector. Because from the company Mesta, we have on the panel Meta Marie Leonardsen. She is head of organizational development at Mesta. And Mesta is a company with expertise in road infrastructure. And representing the government, we have Elisabeth Lier Haugseth, Director General at the Department for Equality, Non-Discrimination and International Affairs at the Ministry of Culture and Equality. With us, we have Mariette Christoffersen Bø. She is Assistant Director of Labour Market and Social Affairs at the Confederation of Norwegian Enterprise. And last but not least, Synnøve Konglevold, Special Advisor at the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions. A warm welcome to all of you. So the first question goes to the tripartite colleagues. And the question for you three is, in which ways has tripartite cooperation been important for promoting gender equality in the world of work over the years from each of your perspectives? Let's begin with the Confederation of Trade Unions. Please, Synnøve, the floor is yours.
This is a really, do you hear me? I'm not muted, okay. It is a quite big question you're asking, and I have thought about how can I start to reply on this today, and I would like to start with this concept of tripartite cooperation. It is quite advanced, and what do we really mean about that? So I would like I would like to also thank Juliette's presentation. That was really good and a really good help. But I would also underline that this has been developed over many years. And I would also like to hesitate that when we talk about tripartite cooperation, it can be misunderstood as a pure harmony model. But I would like to say also here that the social partners in Norway, we have different interests, just like in all other countries. And also governments in Norway come from shifting sides of the political landscapes. So we have different interests, both as social partners and the different governments. But overall, we see that also that we have some common interests. And when we talk about tripartite cooperation, that is first, as Juliette in her introduction also talked about, that is first and foremost on the macro level. Also, as you, Gudrun, talk about your grandmother, she was an activist down on the local level, but the tripartite cooperation is first and foremost on the macro level. It has to do with macroeconomic policy, with regulation of the economy, of non-corruption, of regulation of the labor market, of income security for workers, if businesses need to close down, to have pensions, to the public welfare, all these big structures. But then again, these structures, the way we organize the Norwegian society in the big factors, that is essential to gender equality. My role here today, I represent the trade unions, and I come from a confederation that represents about half of those who are union members in Norway. And about half of our members come from the private sector, half of our members come from the public sector, and we are about 50-50 men and women. Our main targets, political targets, that is work for all, workers' rights, and fair wages. These are also our most important targets when it comes to gender equality. Because having work for all, that means work for both men and women in the economy. To have good workers' rights, that is particularly important to those who are more vulnerable in the labor market. And to have fair wages is important to promote equal pay. So my first response to your question is that the most important way that tripartite cooperation works to promote gender equality is through this macro level and the big policy issues. But that being said, this is not enough. You need to have people like your grandmother, and they are not only and you need to have these people both in civil society, in businesses, in trade unions, and even in the government. You need to have people that have that are feminists, both men and women that are feminists, and work to promote women's rights, and to see that we need to have special attention on gender equality to give men and women the same possibilities. So that will be my first answer. Yes.
Thank you so much, Synnøve, for such an elaborate and interesting answer. I think you covered a lot. But let's hear from Mariette from the enterprise perspective to the same question. Please, Mariette, the floor is yours. Microphone. Your microphone is still off, I'm afraid.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, as Synnøve has pointed out, constructive tripartite cooperation has been absolutely crucial in achieving policy changes that have enabled gender equality in working life in Norway. And the early stages of gender equality in Norway, if we go back several decades to Gudrun's grandmother and my grandmother, this was a result of, and even before that, a result of women activists and women workers who demanded equal rights, both from the government, but also from their employers. And it's not that many generations ago that women workers were expected to quit their job when they married or they had children. Gudrun's grandmother set up a kindergarten. My grandmother, unfortunately, was one of the women who had to quit her job. So it's not that long ago that this was the case in Norway. And with the absence of maternity leave and daycare for children, it was difficult for women to combine working with having a family. And it was also a higher risk to employers of hiring women of childbearing age, because the woman would most likely not stay for long in the job. So with this backdrop, some of the most important factors in achieving gender equality in labour market participation in Norway from the enterprise perspective has been the introduction of policy measures such as paid parental leave and subsidised daycare for children. And this has enabled women to partake in the labour market on a more equal footing to men, and at the same time as it has reduced the risk to employers of hiring women that had existed for decades. The trade unions and employer organizations stood together and agreed on the importance of these policy measures, and have, through dialogue with different governments, been key players in securing support for these changes. And these developments have, I mean, in a way, it's been taken decades for us to reach where we are now. And it was not until the 1970s that Norwegian women started entering the labour market in large numbers. The economy was growing, companies were in need of increasing numbers of workers. And the tripartite cooperation about policy instruments to enable more women to take on paid work has led to enormous economic gains for Norway. We have estimated that 20% of the increase in Norwegian GDP per capita from the 1970s and until today can be linked to the increase in labour market participation of women. So the tripartite dialogue and cooperation has led to more gender equality, which in turn also has had a great impact on Norwegian society and economy as a whole.
Thanks very much, Mariette. There are so many important aspects you're covering here, but in the interest of time, I'll move on to hear from the government's perspective to this question, the role of tripartite cooperation for promoting gender equality in the world of work. Please, Elisabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gudrun, and thanks to Synnøve and Mariette as well for interesting thoughts and presentations from your perspectives. Another grandmother history maybe now that we are in this sphere. My grandmother, she would have been 119 years, so she was born some years before your grandmother, Gudrun. She was a working woman all her life. They were a family with quite little money. They had to work, both of them. And actually my father, he was in the kindergarten. But at that time, in the late 30s, the kindergartens were a help to families of poorer, which had very low economies, so that both parents had the ability to work. But that was another aspect than letting women work if they wanted to. So, well, there was another way into the kindergartens, and not for everybody, of course. And before I answer your question, Gudrun, about the tripartite cooperation, only a few words on the Norwegian context and build upon what Juliet said earlier. For several decades, gender equality has been recognized as a very important value in Norwegian society. And that's both a question of a fair society, but it's also a question of an economically robust society, which benefits all of us. And there has been, and there still is, a political census to prioritize a high participation of both women and men in the labor force. And that's a goal which is agreed upon across all political parties. And that's, of course, an important impact in the processes which are going on. And I would also mention the strong labor and employment laws, the formal frames around the work life in Norway. That's in particular the Work Environment Act and the Gender Equality Act. They are important milestones, security, necessary flexibility between work and family responsibilities. And the Norwegian context covers many stakeholders taking an active part, pushing for more gender equality in work life and society at large, including, of course, the government, the social partners, private sector, civil society, or actors such as women movement, research communities, different political parties, and as well as the media. So that this is about decades of intervention from the government and parliament, as well as from the social partners. So to your question about the tripartite cooperation and our experience from the government's aspect, it's a very important cooperation. It's based on robust traditions in Norwegian work life and politics. It has a high standing in Norway and is known to contribute to a healthy economy, as I said. It has been and still is an important factor in bringing more women into the labor market. And the social partners, the employer and employee organizations, are known to take an active role in the public debate about the development of new policies. And just as we heard LO and HO state right now, we're maybe not agreed upon all questions, but I think that's not less important and enlarges the constructive dialogue and discussions leading to concrete results. The different organizations, they represent different groups in work life, and they formulate and present arguments representing the interests of the different groups in their dialogue with the government, which is important for us. And by doing so, the social partners have over the years played an important role in promoting decent working conditions and in the creation of the universal and comprehensive social security systems and rights. So it has helped to improve the opportunities for women and men alike to combine work and family life. So in my opinion, the tripartite cooperation has proven to be a success for the development of a gender equal and robust work life. I believe that in the future, the employer and employee organizations will continue to play a key part in the success of improving gender equality work life and in society at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have very elaborately described some very important structures, all of you. We'll move on from that and go to the company that we have soon, but I noticed some of you have a comment. Would you like to?
Yes, I just would, listening to the government representative here, I would take the opportunity to point that we have a double regulation in many ways in the labor market. So we both have these important laws that Mrs. Högstedt was talking about, the Labor Environment Act and the Gender Equality and Anti-Discrimination Act. But we also have the collective agreement in both at the national level and also branch levels and local levels. So it's this combination of working from gender equality from the national level, both in collective agreements and by laws, and to work from down in the local collective agreements. So I just wanted to pinpoint that before I give the word to Mesta. Thank you.
I agree with you.
Thank you. That was very well described. And I'm sure, or I think, and I hope that maybe some of the participants, you have questions. If you want to hear more about this, we have a Q&A session at the end as well. So please ask questions in the chat. So we learned that the structures are vital and very important. But I'm curious to learn more about how it works at the level of an actual workplace, such as where you work, Meta. So I'm curious to know, what are the most important gender equality issues today on your sort of company floor and in your workplace? Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Gudrun. So hello, I'm so grateful that I could be invited here today and to listen to all of you that has already something to say. So the most important gender issues in Mesta, where I work, is working with the gender balance and also enhancing the understanding of why diversity matters, not only taking the issue of the gender. But if we should focus a bit on the gender in our company today, we have worked a lot with improving the gender balance, both in organization and also in our industry. However, we recognize that there is still a long way to go, and we need to work not as single players, but we need to work with different players, including the education sector, to achieve our objective of a more gender balanced workplace. Because in our industry, which is construction, it starts with education. Unfortunately, far less women than men chooses an education related to construction, which means that our recruitment base is way too low. And to encourage more women to choose an education within construction, we need to work together with the schools, the teachers, the counselors. We need to work with parents. And perhaps some women might find the tone in our industry a bit challenging or rough or intimidating. But the motivation for working, it has to start early. And this is also a matter of the community. It's not just not just something we need to do inside every company. It has to be, we have to involve more parties because this is really important. And the other aspect is that many companies in our industry want to recruit internally, especially for management positions. And recent numbers from our industry shows that there are only 9% women working in our industry, and 2% of those are construction workers. So if we should continue with the aim of recruit internally, it will take many years. So we need help. So I think maybe that is one of the big challenges. And also another challenge is that when we talk about gender issues, just as today, we are only women in the panel, and we are many women that listens. So what we have acknowledged is that we need to also involve the men and involve the key players that actually can make a change. And we need to raise their understanding on why this is important and play on the same team. So yeah, I think that was enough for now.
Thank you so much, Meta. That is so interesting to hear about a real factory floor, so to speak, or a company level experience. I detected a small challenge here to the other panelists as well. So I'd like to actually turn to the government and Elisabeth again to hear more from your side. Bearing in mind that Mesta is dependent on these larger societal structures, including the education sector, as Meta pointed out, to have a recruitment pool of women. So I'm curious to hear more about how these structures might work. And Elisabeth, can you then tell us more about the role of government and your ministry and the role it plays in tripartite cooperation more specifically?
Yes, I can do so. And maybe I should go to a quite concrete example also. The Ministry of Culture and Equality is responsible for coordinating a working group with the social partners, where we discuss all relevant questions regarding gender equal work life, among other questions. And we meet at a regular basis to discuss gender equality also therein. And I believe that this cooperation is also a good platform for the further cooperation and discussing how to achieve a good working environment and how we can reduce also sickness, absence. And to your presentation, Meta, it is also important to cooperate with other ministries in the government, like the Ministry for Education, for example, to make it relevant for girls to choose this STEM, to have a STEM education, and also in the other way for men to choose untraditional work, because that would also balance the whole work life, we believe. We also work on the questions of part-time work right now, and as you know, there has been quite a big work on that. It has been an issue on the agenda in this dialogue between the government and the social partners for a long time. For many years, we have faced with challenges regarding involuntary part-time employment, and that is a factor that keeps women very often, we see, regretfully, out of full participation in work life. 25% of the total workforce is part-time employed, but we see there are a majority of them are women. 35% of all women, actually, while 15% of all men are part-time employed. And you could discuss how much the women want to work part-time themselves. That can also be due to structures at home, expectations on how of who should take care of the children. Still, we're not in the 40s or the 50s or 60s, the 1960s, but we're in 2020. But still, I think some women face the expectations of taking the care of the family more than men, and that also has an impact. And that maybe you would call it a part-time work on their own choice, but you can still ask that. So this is a question the government and the social partners have discussed a lot. So it was to legally regulate full-time employment as the standard norm in Norwegian labor market, and the employers who want to have part-time, apply part-time instead of full-time, they have to document and give proof of their needs and explain why they should why they need part-time employment. So that is one concrete example from what we find very important to work with the social partners on.
Thank you so much, Meta. We hear that the government is working on it, so that is good. And I'm glad we could bring those issues up in this panel. It's almost like we're having a tripartite dialogue right here, right now. We have a few minutes left, so I'll ask you to give the fairly brief answers, so 1 to 2 minutes from now on. And I'll move on to Norwegian Enterprise. Representing employers, Mariette, you might get this question a lot, but some might say that working for gender equality takes too much time and effort, and business might lose its competitive edge. So we need some counter arguments from you. So therefore, can I ask you, what are arguments for why employers are interested in promoting women's rights and participation in the labour market?
Yes, our member surveys show you that most of our members, well over 90%, say that gender equality and diversity, also in a broader sense, is one of the most important things they are working within the company. And you say that working with this can take off their competitive edge. Actually, we're seeing quite the opposite now. We're seeing companies, well, first of all, having more workers to choose from, basically, a larger pool of potential workers is good for business. You can, instead of being limited to recruiting from just half the population, you now have a wider pool of workers to choose from if women are more equally represented in the labour market. And research also shows that gender equality can lead to a more innovative and more productive business. So this is becoming more important to many companies now, who now focus on the triple bottom line: the economic, environmental, and social sustainability, with gender equality being part of the social sustainability bit. And companies are also meeting increasing demands from both employees and also customers to deliver when it comes to diversity and more equal representations. Job applicants are now asking companies in the job interview if they have a company strategy for gender equality and diversity. So this is something companies have to deliver on now, and not just because it's the right thing to do or because it's financially profitable, but also because this is becoming a central part of a company's ability to compete for and to attract the best and the brightest workers. So we're seeing a shift now, I think. I mean, for many years we've argued for the economic benefits of gender equality, which has been a very important argument in order to get company leaders on board. But now we're increasingly seeing that this is less of a relevant argument now, because the companies are now focusing on gender equality and diversity in its own right, regardless of the profits.
Was a fantastic development you're describing. That's very inspiring, I have to say. I'm curious to hear from Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions now. What your main priorities and issues for workers in terms of gender equality are, perhaps today. So, Synnøve, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I have been working with gender equality in the Confederation of Trade Unions in Norway for 10 years now. And all these years to increase full-time work among women has been a main priority. Because as had been talked about earlier today, the part-time rate among women is much higher than among men. And this means that women are not to the same extent self-sufficient economically. They are not in the same extent independent and to be able to support themselves. So to increase full-time work and to that means that we need both a society with kindergartens, etc., that enables women to work full-time, but also that it has to do with regulation of working hours, that you are supposed to be expected to be available for your employer at all times. So it also has to do with the regulation of the labor market, and there both laws are important, but also collective agreements, and in the end our possibility to take conflict. So to work to promote full-time work among women, to make women have the same to participate and at equal terms with men, that is our main issue.
Thank you so much. We learned so much. We know that employers are interested in working for equality all by themselves now, without needing any pushing. And that regulation of working hours are among things that are important for workers in the Confederation of Trade Unions. But now I'm curious to learn more about how we work for equality in the workplace again, Meta. I'm curious to learn about examples of how your business works to promote equality, and maybe especially from the viewpoint of working in a male-dominated sector. How do you work to promote gender equality? And perhaps what have you achieved?
Thank you. So our understanding of this is that it has to all start at the top, at the people that have influence and can actually do something. And that started with the board of directors in Mesta, who works strategically to create a gender balance at the top level. And they actually dared to invest in a CEO without industry experience or industry expertise. She is a woman. She comes from law and finance. That is her primary background, not construction. And what she has done, she has created a management team that is diverse. It is 50-50%, and that is so inspiring. And she has also created for Mesta great economic results. And of course, I think that should be a role model for other companies. And when she is being asked, how could you do that? How could you change the management teams to be 50-50 diverse? And she said that is my role. That is my responsibility. And I think she has the understanding. And that is my other point of view, that you have to have top management leaders that knows why it is important, that has the capability and understanding of why diversity matters, and can create the structures internal in a company, because that's like a waterfall. And when it begins at the top, it also do something about the organization and creates change. And another thing that we have done in Mesta is that we were the founders of Diversitas. It is a network in our industry working towards gender balance and more diversity. So what we do is that we cooperate with other big companies that has big power, and we do not see each other as competitors, but we see that we have to cooperate to both change the culture in our industry, and we have to work together to get more people to actually want to work with construction. So I think the cooperation is maybe some of the keys. And the last thing that I also want to say is that we have worked a lot with developing inclusive leaders to raise their understanding of why diversity is important. And then we can build inclusive structures and processes. And we are very grateful for the new, I don't actually remember the English word, but there is a new, maybe you remember, Gudrun, the method.
I do.
Yes. Yeah.
The activity and the reporting duty. I think that's another seminar, but
I think so too. So, but we are very grateful for that, and I think it's very important when these acts come, you have to follow them because it's a great help for companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mette. We are going to wrap up with one final question. So I'll ask you to be very brief in your answers. I've learned so much by listening to you. You have learned that none of you operate in a vacuum. It is a constant interplay between you, between the government, parliament, workers, employers, and workplaces like yours, Mette. And then we've also mentioned the activists and pioneers for gender equality, such as our grandmothers, but also the media, the public, and an active public debate are also all important aspects of this. But we see how structures, agreements, rules for the corporation, such as collective agreements, knowledge and research, and trust are important ingredients too for a gender equal working life. So, but in this complex reality then, can you nevertheless at the end give us your best advice for how to achieve gender equality in the world of work in 1 or 2 sentences? Can I ask first the government, then employers, then Mette, and workers respond with your best advice. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Gudrun. 1 or 2 sentences. That was very difficult. But I think I would just say there are 3 important factors I would underline then. First, that's the recognition of the workers and employers organizations contributing in the development of the framework for a gender equal work life. That's essential. The second is the formal frames and the good legal structures start stating labor rights in general and equal rights in work life in particular. And I'm a lawyer myself, so I believe in this right-based approach. And Synnøve, I would also include the collective agreements, of course. And thirdly, I think important for achieving gender equality is a real possibility for both mothers and fathers to be able to combine work responsibilities with family responsibilities. And I have also a fourth, and I was thinking of that when I listened to you, Mette, that is also starting very early with knowledge and awareness already in school age for both boys and girls to understand and to recognize the importance of participations from both gender. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, employers.
Yes, I think I must agree with all the points that Elizabeth pointed out here. Role models, very important in getting girls and women to choose the same or education and work at the same level as men. And also a message to the government representatives listening today, implement policy measures that enable women to combine working with having a family, as Elizabeth also pointed out. And these measures, they may be a large cost in the state budget, such as paid parental leave, subsidized daycare. But in the Norwegian experience, these are measures that will increase companies' access to labor and in turn can increase productivity and economic growth.
Thank you so much for useful advice. Moving on to Mette.
Yes, I have to say I agree with all that has been mentioned. But for us, the most important thing is to enhance the understanding of why diversity matters, and also have role models who could come with the stories, who has actually been in maybe management positions or have done something good and involved the organization at all levels.
Thank you. And last but not least, Synnøve from the workers.
Yes, thank you. My best advice is first that you have to secure these fundamental labor rights so that you can have a stable job and that you can have a living wage and that you can be economically independent without having to work all 24/7. So you can combine work and rest and family life. Then the next one is investing in the care economy. And the final is that you need to be aware of the, you need feminists all over the place. That is my final advice, to be aware of the limitations that the traditional gender roles are placing on women in all countries, also even in Norway.
Brilliant, thank you. We need feminists all over the place. And on that note, we'll round up this panel, but we have some time for questions, I believe. Marianne, have we received any questions to the panel?
Well, thank you very much for a lovely panel discussion. There are some comments and questions both in the chat and in the panel. Someone is mentioning that it's more important to document to share life stories of such roles and models as Mesta pointed out to inspire other CEOs and upcoming leaders. So we need to change the perception of people first. And also people are agreeing that it's important to have awareness on engendering trade unions for women to participate and be active in all levels. There are a couple of questions also in the chat. From Sudan, Balgis Badri. Can the trade unions help Ministry of Labor in Sudan to develop its trade union law and help in training and making it gender equal? And another question from the same. Can Norway help in developing our curriculum in Sudan on vocational and technical education to remove current gender stereotypes and make it help related to market needs? I guess this is a very big and comprehensive question and it's difficult to answer. And I also know that this is also the beginning of discussing these issues with partners in Norway and across countries, but maybe Synnøve Kongevold can say, or also the government, Elizabeth can give some advice on how the trade union has cooperated with the Norwegian government on issues such as them. So I'll give you then 2 minutes to answer, and then I think we will sum up and leave for a break.
Well, first of all, when both trade union and businesses, we work also with interest policies. So we work to, like other organizations, to lobby the government, and we develop policy proposals, and we argue for it both in the public debate and other places. Of course, now this proposal that in the current situation, we have a Labour Party-led government that gives the trade union better access than if it is a conservative government, and vice versa. With conservative governments, the businesses have maybe better access. So we give both written and oral inputs, and we have the different formal meetings and formal also possibilities to give this through public hearings, etc. So there are many ways that we work to give input to the government.
Thank you, Synnøve. And before I give the word to you, Elizabeth, just one more question here on the very end. From Tanzania, it's promising to learn how progressive Norway is on gender equality, both on work and home life, and the amount of investment made from the legal framework to infrastructure. I was wondering, how long has it taken for the country to transform? Apart from the political willingness for transformation, what role has culture played in this? So be 30 seconds. Thank you. I'll give the word to you.
To me. Should I answer first, the first question on how we consider the cooperation between the trade unions and the employees organization, I would say the most important is to recognize the importance of the organizations and to recognize the organizations as such, and also recognizing that the areas where we do not agree fully are also important for us to have their views on various aspects, because we have different roles. I think that's the most important in the cooperation, and how to establish a good structure with the organizations. And the next question too, how long it has taken. It has taken quite a long time. I see that, Marie, you tried for about approximately 200 years, and maybe that's correct. I know there has been a lot of combats up through the years fighting for women's rights in various areas. I think also it has taken a long time, just because you have had to change the culture also in Norway. It wasn't a culture for women working, women of good economic standards. They were expected to be home. Poor families had to work, like I told you about my grandmother and my grandfamily. So I think it has also been a long time change of the culture and how you recognize just a question of fairness, that both women and men participate.
Thank you. That was the quick answer. So it's been a long.
Yes, very quick. Sorry.
And I'm sorry, but we do need to cut off there because we deserves a break, all of us. But we will continue to answer your questions in the chat, and hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation and a network cross borders. So thank you very much to the moderator Gudrun Jevne and the panelists for joining us today. And we will see you back here at 1:45. So in about 13, 14, 15 minutes. Thank you.